The control of fire is one of the staple inventions of humankind, being one of the major catalysts to our explosive growth and technological advancement. Of course, controlling fire necessitates that there is an evil or uncontrollable aspect to it. I'm sure you can imagine a couple tabloid articles related to the fire that bring this point home. Similarly, Rimworld prioritizes firefighting at the top of the priority list because fire bad. In fact, I would even consider that fire very bad, or even dare I say it, fire very ungood. So what if we were to embrace the darkness, and make all of our colonists incapable of firefighting? In a vanilla playthrough, this would be very difficult, if not impossible. Honestly, we'd probably burn down our entire base before the end of spring. So I've added a couple mods to make it so chem fuel can't melt steel beams, alongside some quality of life mods to make our ponds a little more efficient. Our story then begins in the arid brushland of the Rim, a necessary increase in difficulty over some other biomes, as it affords us the safety of natural fire lines called deserts. Living here does mean that we'll gain a boon of permanent summer, but have almost no wood or food for the initial stretch of the game. Oh, and look, we have neighbors. We'll just leave them alone for a while. In order to survive a hellscape like this, we'll need to grow our own trees. As much as I'd like to swear off wood entirely from the get-go, setting up non-wood walls and defenses takes an unnecessarily long time, and we need that time for other tasks. So, tree sowing is up first on the research tree, while we focus on getting some initial food grown and a reasonable barracks set up. As I came to terms with the potential futures that a no-fire society might bring, one of my pawns attempted to sabotage the colony by beginning a food binge with insect jelly on the map. Truly a recipe for disaster. Nothing we as non-firefighters can't handle. I mean, we have so much time on our hands for trivial tasks like this. We could be sleeping instead of playing Ring Around the Rosie with raid bosses, because Ben couldn't handle a bit of heat and room sharing. That said, through a stroke of luck or stupidity, Ben survived, and shortly thereafter a slave trader came and blessed us with a fourth mouth to feed. We looked past his past life, as a slave, and embraced him into the cult of fire fleeing. A period of happiness descended upon the colony, and we survived without any issues for an entire hour. With tree sowing now out of the way, we were able to move on to air conditioning and stone cutting before moving into production-focused technologies. It was smooth sailing until the summer hit. Like, the real summer, not just the permanent summer that enveloped the region. Outdoor temperatures skyrocketed to 50 degrees, meaning our air-conditioned mountain base was only capable of cooling the air down to a balmy 31. Heatstroke became a fact of life for our poorly dressed workers, but it was tolerable. At least it seemed tolerable. That was until food poisoning hit 2 of our colonists, immediately increasing their pain to their limits. Corey was the first to drop, the heatstroke and food poisoning being too much for her nude body to bear. Jane, almost expectedly, dropped immediately after attempting to rescue Corey, presumably from the heat and exertion, or maybe just in spite towards her creator. This was, of course, all happening while Ben was fleeing in abject terror during a food binge, obviously unable to remember the trauma that occurred 15 days ago, when he went into the same cave for that same jelly. He, also succumbing to food poisoning, vomited upon leaving the insect cave. With 2 of our colonists now incapacitated, Udai played the hero and brought Jane indoors. Not that it helped because the wood generators were out of wood, and the air conditioning was off. Ben dropped next, unable to open the entrance through the outer wall, and Udai, feeling left out, followed suit. I was crushed. Utterly crushed. Did swearing off firefighting anger the gods? What brought such suffering to my people? How cruel was this world that they were thrust into? This was it. It was the end of the run, and I admitted defeat. Then, a beacon of light emerged from the darkness. A man in black had entered the map. For those unaware, the man in black is a pawn that enters when all your pawns are killed or incapacitated, and is typically seen at the end of a run. I see him mostly as a harbinger of death. But today, he came as a savior. Wrapped in garments that provided some semblance of heat protection, he approached each colonist in turn, hauling them into the safety and shelter of the base. He fed everyone, rebuilt the failing infrastructure, and continued to haul everyone back to bed as they tried to go back to work, before once again collapsing from food poisoning. He was a beacon of hope, burning brightly and inspiring my pawns, and more importantly, inspiring me. In a matter of days, food and wood were collected, power was restored, and the problems of the past seemed to melt away. The brightest lights, though, often burn out the fastest, and a mere 3 days after he arrived, our savior in black succumbed to a food binge of his own. mimicking the path of Ben into the insect den, intent on consuming jelly until death did he part. My colonists, just barely recovered from the food poisoning that Thunder had saved them from, were unable to challenge the insects in combat, and Thunder, light of all lights, perished in that cave that day. But that was just the first hour and a half of gameplay, and we still hadn't seen a fire yet, so let's move on and leave him as a footnote to the story that he was. The base expansion continued, initially with the replacement of the barracks in favor of rooms, smoothed and made beautiful with square footage and jade furniture, and our previously 4, now 5 colonists became happy with living in the furnace that was this place. With 5 people now, our ability to press forward through the tech tree became steady and uninterrupted, and geothermal power replaced the inconsistent wood-fired generator that starved the map of wood. Advanced lights, armor, blades, and more were in our grasp. We began to grow sick with arrogance, going so far as to plant cotton. Cotton! This isn't a problem in itself. We used it initially for sandbags and poker tables, but it wasn't long until our thoughts turned to luxury instead of survival. Our recreation room, you see, was spacious and surely nothing to scoff at. But it lacked class. It was almost a crime not to provide the room with the utmost je ne sais quoi, if you will. Some pizzazz if you won't. Therefore, 1 year after our arrival, carpet making was researched, and our stone floors were converted to a stylish and ironically named marine blue, a vicious mockery towards our goal to avoid firefighting at all costs. I'd say it was necessary mockery. Like, if you're gonna burn, it best be from flying too close to the sun. At least then there's a story worth telling. Surprisingly though, the gods were not angered by our impudence. The times moving forward were stale, lackluster even, all things considered. Perhaps Cassandra was taking pity on us after the early arrival and thereafter rapid exit of the Man in Black. Perhaps she too was interested in how we planned to avoid a catastrophic defeat. No matter the reason, the following seasons were peaceful, idyllic almost, if not for the raids from the warring tribes. Even so, only 16 warring tribespeople were buried before the end of the second year, a count that does not include the half-dozen that were incidentally murdered by the insects that were still cohabitating the map with me. I was still very much afraid of them after the first year of struggles, so they got to live with my colony while it grew, and we took advantage of those northern raiding defenses. By the beginning of the second year, our colony's technological advances had surpassed those of my wildest dreams, forcing me to start completing technologies I had no interest in, like psychite refining and go juice production. An urge, ever so small, to research fire foam came over me, but I suppressed it. It was not the way forward. Instead, our colony of now 7 people continued to expand, exploiting the natural ore deposits that hid deep in the mountainous terrain. Defenses and energy production continued to build, with our western side being fortified next. This side would become the major defensive location for our base in the future, with its vast open space being perfect for all manner of traps and assault prevention strategies. Part of the effort included the better late than never demise of those insects, having been here so long that the Man in Black's body had deteriorated entirely into dust. We did get a little lucky in this assault, with this one mega spider getting confused in its pathing and just kind of blindly running away until its death. Their friends, less delusional and more apt to fighting, were very quickly introduced to bullets thereafter. This offensive assault brought things full circle for me, freeing the entirety of the map for the first time in 2 years, while also unlocking gold, silver, and jade, all of which were being held captive by the bugs since day one. Time continued to pass. Pawns came and went to disease and capture, but our fire-fleeing mantra remained. Our research speed began to outpace our faction's tech level, with our industrial faction advancing into the spacer tech tree and marine armor being just on the horizon. We were so advanced that we somehow tricked a boomalope into being friends with us. Think about that for a second. A creature of fire, with a literal explosive personality, joined us. At this point in the run, it became apparent to me that the goal had shifted towards how blatantly we could mock the gods, and not be punished. I mean, yeah, we lost some crops to fire, and had to spend some time cutting out impromptu fire lines to avoid a total crop loss, but this was nothing compared to what could have been disastrous at best. Maybe this was the run. Maybe we had chosen wisely, and the architects of times long past, foreseeing such a challenge against nature itself, were gleeful, chuckling at the rebellion against primality and logical reasoning. Maybe this was destined to be nothing but perfection. The carpet caught fire. And in the following seconds of my pawns' lives, entire years of planning and logical breakdown of duties coalesced into a full-blown panic. This was it. This was the test from our makers to prove our worth. Carpet can't be deconstructed, you see, but it can be replaced. Step 1 was to do this, and our builders in order of proximity were tasked to rapidly replace the flammable carpet with stone tile. Next up was to resolve the matter of the dropped carpet, which, without intervention, would catch fire and allow the fire to spread further. A small army of passerbys were tasked to keep up with the constant rate of deconstruction that was occurring. The room with the fire in it, now reaching 50 degrees from the blaze, needed a vent for the heat to escape from, so doors were opened into the northern hallway, while the shelf nearest to the blaze was deconstructed and its valuables hauled away. Once all these things were done, the only thing left to do was wait and watch for the fire to burn out, and pray that the surface area cleared was enough to stop the blaze from spreading further. This was by far the scariest moment in the run for me. It was the testing grounds for the strategy that, for the most part, just sat quietly in the back of my mind, waiting for a moment like this to execute. The operation was obviously a huge success, and informed future non-firefighting firefighting. Having now conquered the fear that held us back, we carved a beeline for victory. First, of course, by installing more firepower, and then by planning our escape via rocket-propelled freedom. I've never won Rimworld before, so to say that I was over-prepared is an understatement. Sometime during the second half of the 4th year, we had completely finished the tech tree, even finishing up the most useless of the options like watermill generators. A blatant jest towards the arid brushland that we chose to live in. I mean, there's literally no water on the map. It's useless to research it. At this point, we were only held back by our lack of Persona Core, an ancient AI chatbot that keeps you company during the rocket voyage through the stars. We had been offered it before, but we were never in a position to acquire it. In the meanwhile, though, we fashioned marine armor for each of our colonists to avoid any further deaths, but our time was still very much limited. At this point, many of our colonists had lost limbs or had collected a bevy of permanent injuries. These past 5 years on the rim had aged them all by decades. The plan for exit was set in motion, and a potato field was slowly replaced with ship components and, in time, enough crypto-sleep caskets for the entire colony. No colonist would be subjected to the panic-inducing sight of rocket engine fire scorching the landscape. Not in a fire-fleeing run, that's for sure. Some deaths were inescapable though, and the fates will cut your life's thread before you have a chance to consider alternatives. In the 11th hour, mere days before the launch sequence began, we lost our 5th and final colonist, Kamarov, while fighting a mech cluster that had no business murdering anyone. A jade sarcophagus was commissioned as a final send-off to death, and to this world before the stars. And Kamarov, age 50, was buried therein. The launch sequence, something that I had dreaded for the 40 hours that this run had taken, was a cakewalk, compared to what I thought it would be. The outer walls were never breached, and I was left sitting in my base cooking simple meals for 15 days as I waited out the clock. That time was a time of reflection for me, a time to think about what this challenge meant to me. To combat fire by fleeing. That seemed counterintuitive for the longest time. Maybe there was some deep meaning behind all of this, like how you have to pick your battles and make sacrifices for the greater good. Maybe it's a lesson in being your very best self and leaning on your friends for support in times of strife. And our colony represents our collective desire to burn brightly and be the main character to our story, and to make a life worth waking up to each morning, and to be happy about each night. The strife, hardship, and problem-solving that had to be overcome to keep the colony alive in the face of flames, hell-bent on consuming everything that we had held dear, pushed for creative solutions to otherwise simple problems. Maybe that problem-solving and searing resolve was the ticket off the planet. Those sleeping pawns and those crypto-sleep caskets represent the product of our endless life pursuits before the eerie shade of blackness and death approach us, our life's longevity being finite compared to the infinite reign of death. Perhaps the goal, not only of this run, but to life itself, is to live a life that could end in crypto-sleep, and you being content with such a fate. If you were put into a cryogenic state for 1,000 years, and had to leave your past entirely behind, could you do that? Could you be content doing that tomorrow? Have you burned bright enough to be snuffed out so quickly? Maybe the endless raids and premature colonist deaths represent all of the alternative life paths that you chose not to take, that did not lead you to the bright burning existence, and you, living and breathing right now, are ever brightly burning along your path to crypto sleep. Or maybe there was zero meaning or lesson to be learned from this, and the 261 invaders that now lay buried in dirt 50 meters away from Salvation died for nothing. For now though, I'll thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting me with your time on this path to our personal crypto sleeps. If you're not at your limit for abject existential terror, consider watching this other video of the life story of an Alzheimer's patient, or review your thoughts on alien genocide in the video in the bottom right. If I've lit your heart ablaze, maybe you'll even subscribe, or boosh the like button, or maybe donate some money monthly through Patreon. Whatever your fate's thread brings you, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.